On a cold morning at the edge of the Roman Empire, 800 soldiers shared a room with no doors, no walls between the seats, and a trench of running water carrying everything away beneath them. This was Housesteads, a fort on Hadrian's Wall, built within 10 years of the year 122. At the lowest corner of the camp sat the latrine, stone benches with keyhole holes cut into them, a constant stream flushing the channel below, a cistern holding 24,000 litres, waiting for a dry spell. Men sat shoulder to shoulder and talked. Going to the toilet was a social hour, not a private shame. For cleaning, they reached for a sponge fixed to the end of a stick, dipped in vinegar or salt water, and passed it along. Sponges don't grow in British waters, so this one had travelled from the Mediterranean to the far north of the world to wipe a soldier on the frontier. Hold on to that sponge. We'll come back to it. Here is the strange thing about the English toilet. It does not begin in ignorance and climbs slowly toward the modern bathroom. It begins at a peak, Roman engineering, running water, public sanitation, and then it falls off a cliff and stays there for 1,000 years. When the legions left Britain around the year 410, the plumbing left with them. The aqueducts silted up, the flushing channels dried. Nobody maintained what nobody understood. Within a few generations, the most advanced sanitation the island had ever seen was a ruin that people grazed sheep around. What replaced it was a hole in the ground. The medieval word was a jakes, or a gong, a cesspit dug behind the house, filling slowly year after year. When it filled, someone had to empty it. That someone was the gong farmer. In 1406, a London gong farmer named Thomas Watergate was paid 40 shillings to clear out a single cesspit. That was a fortune, more than a skilled stonemason earned in the same span, because almost nobody else would do the work. He did it at night, by candlelight, lowering himself into other people's waste, and when the job was done, he walked down to the Thames and washed himself in the same river the city drank from. Then he disappears from the record. We don't know what became of him. The city tried, in its way. Around 1421, money left behind by Richard Whittington, the real man behind the pantomime Dick Whittington, paid for a vast public toilet in Cheapside. It had 128 seats, 64 for men, 64 for women, side by side over a gully that the tide was supposed to flush. Londoners called it the Long House. It would still be standing, in some form 400 years later, but a single building with 128 seats was a drop against a city drowning in its own filth. For most people, for most of the Middle Ages, the answer to human waste was simple. Throw it in the street, throw it in the river, let the rain take it. Then, in 1596, a courtier did something clever, and almost nobody noticed. His name was Sir John Harrington, and he was the godson of Queen Elizabeth I. He designed a device with a bowl, a cistern of water above it, and a valve that, when pulled, washed everything down and away. He called it the Ajax, a pun, because a jakes was the slang word for a privy, and Harrington found the whole thing hilarious. He wrote a book about it that was secretly a coded insult aimed at one of the Queen's favourites, and it got him thrown out of court for a while. Elizabeth had one installed at Richmond Palace anyway, and here the invention should have changed everything. It didn't. Harrington's toilet had no bend in the pipe, which meant the smell of the sewer drifted straight back up into the room. It swallowed 7.5 gallons of water for a single flush, in a country with no plumbing to supply it. People laughed at him and moved on. The flushing toilet was invented and then forgotten for another 200 years. The fix, when it came, was almost absurdly small. In 1775, a Scottish watchmaker named Alexander Cumming patented a pipe bent into the shape of an S. Water settled in the curve and sat there, a permanent seal between the room and the sewer below. The smell had nowhere to go. That single bend, the loop of pipe you have under your toilet right now, is the reason an indoor toilet became something a person could bear to keep inside the house. For a long time it stayed a luxury for the rich. What made it ordinary was a crowd. In 1851, an engineer named George Jennings installed public flushing, toilets at the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park. To use one cost a penny, and for that penny you got a clean seat, a towel, a comb, and a shoe shine. Hundreds of thousands of people paid it. It is very likely where the polite English phrase for going to the toilet to spend a penny quietly began, and yet the waste still went where it had always gone, into the river. By the 1850s, more than 2 million people were emptying their cesspits and their new flushing toilets into the Thames, and the Thames carried it back and forth on the tide. Then came the summer of 1858. The heat climbed, the water dropped, and the river, the same river the Gong farmer had bathed in 4 centuries earlier, began to rot in the open air. It came to be called the Great Stink. The smell grew so thick that the curtains in the Houses of Parliament were soaked in chloride of lime just to make the building usable. Standing in Parliament that July, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Benjamin Disraeli, called the Thames a Stygian pool, reeking with ineffable and intolerable horrors. When the smell reached the men who wrote the laws changed quickly. A bill that might have been argued over for years passed in 18 days. The man handed the problem was an engineer named Joseph Bazalgette. He built a network of brick sewers under London, 82 miles of main intercepting tunnels, designed to catch the waste before it reached the city's own stretch of river and carry it far downstream. He worked out the pipe size his population needed, then doubled it on the theory that you only get one chance to dig up London. He was right. Much of what he built is still moving the city's waste today. There is one name left, and it is the one everybody knows. Thomas Crapper was a real plumber in Victorian London, and despite the joke his name seems to make, he did not invent the toilet, and the word did not come from him. It is older than he is. What Crapper actually did was sell. He opened one of the first bathroom showrooms in the world, on the King's Road, putting porcelain toilets in a shop window where respectable Victorians, who were not supposed to admit such things existed, could come and stare. He improved the bullcock and the valve. Mostly he made the toilet something a person could talk about owning, so the story runs from a trench of running water on a frozen Roman frontier, through 1,000 years of holes in the ground, to a watchmaker's bend of pipe and a river that finally stank loudly enough to be heard. It was never a straight climb. England had clean public sanitation, lost it completely, forgot it for 40 generations, and was only dragged back to it by the unbearable smell of its own mistakes. That sponge on a stick, the one carried all the way from the Mediterranean to Hadrian's Wall. By the time London finished its sewers, no one in England had used anything like it for over 1,000 years. The Romans had simply been there first, sitting shoulder to shoulder in a room with no doors, talking while clean water carried the day away beneath them. And then everyone forgot for a very long time that it could be done at all.